Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today I shall be doing a review on the complete 22nd season of South Park on DVD. This is yet another 2-disc set containing all 10 episodes from the 22nd season, and I have to say, this is honestly one of my favourite seasons in recent years. I found this to be overall very solid as far as the overall episode content is structured, and it was certainly a very rewarding season for the content and the callbacks in particular. For example, we have many callbacks to previous characters we have seen throughout the show, such as, obviously going off the front cover, we have Satan making a grand return, Manbear Pig and Al Gore. That was a huge surprise and something that I did fully welcome for this season, definitely very well utilised throughout. And speaking of those characters, we have then sort of callbacks to sort of past South Park characters similarly, such as Jimbo and Ned. I thought was a great kind of cameo in this season. Father Maxie makes a return. We have Towley coming back. So loads of sort of iconic South Park characters that have been sort of featured throughout the longest kind of duration made a grand return in this season. And speaking of which, we have still the serialized kind of structure, even though a lot of episodes are still kind of self-contained to an extent, with certain plot points carrying over. And I think that kind of equal balance, rather than going full for serialization, is definitely the strength to keeping that sort of regime throughout South Park nowadays, since they've experimented with the formula and it's gone one way and then another way in terms of how good or bad it has been over the season. So definitely a strong point for this season in particular. And in terms of the political kind of commentary added to this season overall, some really great content throughout that we shall discuss as we get to the episode. So there's the front cover design with the four main boys and Butters, and the epic sort of 2008 Incredible Hulk style fight between Manbear Pig and Satan. That was definitely a nice homage throughout the series. There's the back cover. Brief synopsis of the season. If you wish to pause and read over, by all means do so. For bonus features, we have mini commentaries by the creators and deleted scenes included as well. And the box set is rated an 18 here in the UK, contains child sexual abuse references and strong sex references. That'll be for the second episode on the season, which is solely why I believe this has been bumped up to an 18 rating. And yeah, runtime, you're looking 214 minutes approximately there. And here is the inside artwork there with Manbear Pig standing triumphant above Satan. This felt really final as far as their fight was sort of portrayed throughout. And before the show was renewed for more seasons, going up to season 26 as of the time of recording this video, a lot of things about this season felt really final going into season 23. So definitely some interesting kind of choices. I'm sure we will see Satan return at some point, since he's not sort of completely gone, thankfully. So definitely some interesting quirks to this season for when it was originally aired, that's for sure. But there's some additional characters featured on there: Al Gore, Randy, and the PC babies with PC Principal and Vice Principal Strong Woman. Some more imagery there from the Satan episode with Manbear Pig. There's Randy, Father Maxie, and Butters, and then opening this up a little bit more, we have the boys trick-or-treating on Halloween, and some artwork there of the Buddha boxers with PC Principal and Strong Woman. And there's your list of episodes, first 5 there on disc 1, and the remaining 5 there on disc 2. And so, going through the episodes, first up we have Dead Kids, which was a pretty interesting opening episode. It was very funny for the kind of repetitive comedy that it had. I feel like it was outdone by the episodes that followed for sure. But it was an okay opening, very funny portrayal of the sort of current kind of political climate we've had in recent years in relation to school shootings, where it's almost kind of normalized with how frequent something like that was happening and being featured on the news. And so that was kind of the sort of base kind of seed, I guess you could term it as, for where this particular plot was growing from, as it's kind of normalized to a point where it's kind of shrugged off, and everyone else is just kind of sort of moving on from that subject, apart from Stan's mother, Sharon, who is kind of sort of overreacting in everyone else's kind of point of view. And Randy tries to pin this on her emotions and then makes various period jokes throughout. And those really awkward kind of hand gestures he's doing behind her back while trying to sort of make it clear to other people what may be wrong with her really caught me off guard. I thought those were really funny Randy moments featured throughout. Next up is A Boy and a Priest, which is an episode deliberately designed to kind of make you feel really uncomfortable with the dark comedy implemented throughout, and that's definitely a strength to this episode, where we bring back the character of Father Maxi, who is kind of publicly shamed on behalf of the Catholic Church for sort of sexual abuse kind of allegations. And when he is publicly roasted during his Sunday services, he then decides to close the doors on the church, and Butter's feeling so sorry for Father Maxi essentially being bullied in public. He reaches out and tries to make him feel better, which is literally taken out of context for having a boy and a priest hanging around together, perhaps not the best kind of look. And so when the town gets really concerned about their disappearance, they call in the superiors from the Catholic Church, who then make it look as though they're trying to clean up what may possibly be a sex abuse scandal. Really crazy episode for those kinds of themes. I'm actually kind of surprised with what they got away with in this episode, but definitely some dark themes are included, and that made for an overall hysterical episode that is probably not for the faint-hearted, but still very, very funny. Next up is The Problem with a Poo, a bit of a pun there, which this episode I found was okay, possibly one of the weakest ones, but I still heavily respect what it was trying to achieve and what it does achieve at that. Bringing back Mr. Hankey once again, who is basically in charge of the Christmas sort of festivities throughout South Park, only for this to be put on the line where he is caught posting offensive content on social media. And with that in mind, he's literally driven out of South Park for being offensive and being an offensive character. And this was supposed to be a metaphor for the scandal relating to the Simpsons character of Apu, who I've done a video kind of sort of focusing on to an extent on the channel before. I'll put a link to that on screen if you're interested in checking that out. But I definitely found this to be an interesting kind of portrayal of that disagreement with Apu being an offensive character. And so at the end of the episode, Mr. Hankey is literally sent to Springfield, which really made me laugh, with the sort of South Park inspired Simpsons animation. Next up is Tegrity Farms, the catalyst for the majority of Season 23's content. And this episode overall was very good. It was surprising to have Towley come back as a character, and I really did enjoy what they were doing with Randy until they sort of heavily kind of elongated it. Not to say that the content was really bad as such, but it definitely sort of outstayed its welcome in a lot of people's opinions. But this episode was overall very good. I particularly enjoyed Randy's kind of personal war on vaping, which was quite amusing throughout. And last up on disc 1 we have The Scoots, which was a pretty fun Halloween-themed episode for this season, and overall was made very enjoyable for the characters it utilised, particularly with Mr. Mackey. And then finally, Kenny gets utilised for once, which I feel his character has been very underused in recent seasons, especially in Season 23 and what we have really so far of Season 24, where he was kind of shoehorned into the vaccination special. But with the Scoots, this was a very fun episode with those two characters teaming up to try and eradicate the town of these e-scooters that very bizarrely seem to be popping up at random, where the other school children plan to use them to make travelling throughout trick-or-treating much easier. And the animations throughout those sequences were really creative in my opinion. Moving on to disc 2, we have Time to Get Cereal and Nobody Got Cereal, which are pretty much interconnected. This brings back the grand return of good old Man Pig and Al Gore, which I loved. Al Gore featured particularly in the first episode out of these two, where he tries to basically sort of stab an apology out of the boys for what happened in the previous episodes. Definitely a funny moment. I quite like the updated kind of animated look for him in this season as well. And as well for Man Pig, where the animation definitely has improved. And that leads us from his reign of terror in this first episode, where they're directed to Satan, who then redirects them to Stan's grandfather, who is responsible for the return of Man Pig, which is made to be this bizarre kind of sort of biblical, sort of philosophical return almost, which is kind of bizarre. Didn't really take to that kind of plot thread, especially when they started trying to sort of force the game release of Red Dead Redemption 2 into this. Felt kind of silly in all honesty, but I did appreciate what it was trying to work with, and the end scene where they're trying to negotiate Man Pig basically bringing his reign of terror to an end, I thought was quite an amusing conclusion to this episode in particular. Next up is Buddha Box, which I thought was a very amusing episode for Cartman struggling, supposedly, with social anxiety, which he does use to his advantage to basically be left alone with his phone, which is where the Buddha Box comes into play, which is meant to be a box of Zen, where you can essentially escape from what is currently going on and just literally sit with your head in a box playing on your phone. It's quite an amusing social commentary on the overusage of mobile phones and how we are basically disconnecting from one another despite the world being made much smaller. I thought that concept alone was very well utilized, with a funny side plot revolving around the PC babies. The PC babies began in the third episode of this season and then were sprinkled throughout as the season continued, with this being kind of their prominent episode where they accidentally get loose, where PC Principal is distracted by his Buddha box and unintentionally become stars under a record label. I thought that was definitely an interesting quirk to the PC Baby characters. And the last two episodes are pretty much again interconnected with Unfulfilled and Bike Parade, where in Unfulfilled we have some references to the movie Billy Elliot, which I thought was very well done as far as the homage goes. And with that in mind, we have an Amazon fulfillment center popping up in South Park, where Amazon is now literally sort of taking the corporate world with a small town. As we continue into Bike Parade, where the fulfillment center goes down after an accident, and then that ignites protests about the fulfillment center. And in Bike Parade, we have Jeff Bezos himself portrayed in South Park as this very strange, sort of telepathic being, which I thought was honestly hilarious. I loved the animated character design for Bezos in these episodes.
See how the box ridicules commercialism in order to try and feel better about itself.
Damn you! You made everything nice and convenient, didn't you, Bezos?
And this episode was pretty dark with how they utilized Bezos in particular, but the remainder of the episode is kind of leading up towards a somewhat kind of Christmas special, where the boys are desperate to try and get the sort of decorations and stuff for the Bike Parade, and so they manage to spin things into their own direction, where the Amazon Fulfillment Center does eventually get going. And this was overall a pretty funny conclusion to the season, but didn't really feel like a final episode to a season. I felt like they could have really elongated this into the next season without going down the Tegrity Farms kind of route. But definitely a fun episode. I quite enjoyed the sort of mall workers that were put out of commission then working for the Amazon Fulfillment Center. Some really interesting concepts throughout, and definitely made for a very fun episode set at that. And with all that said, that is going to do it for my review on the complete 22nd season of South Park. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave me a like down below. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Season 22 of South Park. Do you agree or disagree with any of my opinions? And for more videos and reviews on cartoons and other TV shows, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.
Are you threatening me?